The year was 1914, in the midst of World War I, on a European battlefield. On Christmas Eve, German troops began to put up small Christmas trees lit with candles outside of their trenches, and they sang Christmas carols. From the other side of the no man's land, British and French troops responded with carols of their own. Soon the German soldiers proposed a Christmas truce, and the British and French units agreed. This was nothing formal, nothing worked out by generals, just a spontaneous concurrence between common soldiers in the frontline trenches. Handmade signs popped up with messages like, "You no fight, we no fight," and "Merry Christmas." And soon, soldiers from both sides left their trenches and shook hands. Next, they began to bury their dead who had been lying unreachable in no man's land. Then they even began to share gifts, foodstuffs that had been sent to the front lines for the holiday. In some sectors, the two sides put down their rifles and played soccer. Of course, it couldn't last beyond a couple of days. The generals didn't like it, and they soon commanded the troops to begin firing at each other again. For a few days, both sets of troops tried to keep the spirit of peace going by firing into the air instead of at each other. But the generals soon made them aim. But still, the truce happened, and it was inspired by Christmas. And it tells us that peace on earth is not impossible, just difficult. But if Christmas were to really take hold of our hearts, it would not be all that difficult. Think about this. If enemies on a battlefield could stop fighting because of the infant Jesus, doesn't it seem that our lives ought to be much more prone to peace because of the infant Jesus? You know, I think children could figure this out better than we adults. God reveals his inmost secrets to mere babes, to those of innocent heart. And the scriptures are very clear in that there is a definite connection between God and children. And this truly is at the center of the mystery of Christmas, when God is revealed in the form of a baby. The eternal God becomes what he most loves on earth: a child. But this is no mere sweet sentimentality on God's part. If he loves the childlike, it is because they are empty enough to receive what he wants to give. And this is precisely what must have occurred in the hearts of those men in World War I in 1914. They had become empty enough to receive what he wanted to give them with dignity and respect. And they were willing to stop fighting, to stop killing, to share, to treat each other with dignity and respect. to come out of the trenches. And this is why Jesus came as an infant, as a slave amidst poverty. He chose an unknown village in a remote province for his birthplace. He's born of a poor maiden and accepts all that poverty offers. If he had been born to a high rank and amidst luxury, unbelievers would have said the world had been transformed by wealth. If he had chosen as his birthplace the great city of Rome, they would have thought the transformation had been brought about by civil power. Suppose he had been the son of an emperor. They would have said how useful it is to be powerful. Imagine him the son of a senator. It would have been, look what can be accomplished by legislation. But in fact, what did he do? He chose surroundings that were poor and simple, so ordinary as to be almost unnoticed. A stable for animals, so that people would know that it was the Godhead alone that had changed the world. And somehow this message collectively captivated those troops on the battlefield of World War I in 1914. And it was only when the generals forced them to fight again that they reluctantly began to shoot one another again. How sad. How sad that the generals didn't have the sense of the troops. Why couldn't the generals have gotten together and said, hey, these guys are onto something. Why don't we see what we can do to make this a lasting truce? But they were not empty enough to receive what he wanted to give. They had lost any childlike sense that the troops seemed to have captured. But just think what our world might look like if we could just capture that childlike sense, if we could become empty enough to receive what he wanted to give, if we could come out of the trenches of life. Perhaps within our families, a truce would be called between those who can't seem to get along. Perhaps a truce would be called between neighbors who are angry over some issue that neither is willing to let go of and probably doesn't even remember what the issue was. Perhaps a truce could be called at work between different departments or even between coworkers. But you see, if we could just open ourselves to that childlike sense of the infant Jesus, our lives would be filled with truces. We would have no enemies. We would have fewer arguments. We would have the joy of Christmas in our hearts all year long. Can you imagine what our community here in Charlestown would look like? I'd like to close with a Christmas reflection on St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 13. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. You know, love is patient, love is kind, love is not boastful, all those other love things, right? But this reflection goes like this. If I decorate my house perfectly with plaid bows, strands of twinkling lights, and shiny balls, but do not show love to my family, I'm just another decorator. If I slave away in the kitchen, baking dozens of Christmas cookies, preparing gourmet meals, and arranging a beautifully adorned table at mealtime, but do not show love to my family, I'm just another cook. If I work at the soup kitchen, carol in the nursing homes, and give all that I have to charity, but do not show love to my family, it profits me nothing. If I trim the spruce with shimmering angels and crocheted snowflakes, attend a myriad of holiday parties, and sing in the choir's cantata, but do not focus on Christ, I have missed the point. Love stops the cooking to hug the child. Love sets aside decorating to kiss the husband. Love is kind, though harried and tired. Love does not envy another's home that has coordinated Christmas china and table linens. Love doesn't yell at the kids to get out of the way, but is thankful they are there to be in the way. Love doesn't give only to those who are able to give in return, but rejoices in giving to those who cannot. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. Video games will break. Pearl necklaces will be lost. Golf clubs will rust. But giving the gift of love will endure. My brothers and sisters, come out of the trenches of life and give the gift of love. And we will find that Christmas endures all year long.